Hello, my name is Sentana-Ries. This is part 5 of articles I wrote 17 years ago which I now place under the heading No Banker in Our Paradise. Today is the 4th day of December 2016. For nearly 20 years since the inception of the Internet I have identified myself as being authoritative to the issue of finance, and state emphatically that the current financial system must not be reformed, but must be abolished, and this for the purpose of freeing the people from the yoke to a system which does not work in the people's favor, as it only makes a minority rich which controls the process. My position on this issue is part of the authority of an office to which I am the holder. This office is also recognized by all high councils of this universe. And yet my office is no threat to anyone. It only deals with the issue of restoring a paradise to all people that was lost many thousands of years ago. Therefore no listener of my words should become offended or threatened from an implementation of the thoughts I put forth by the words I now speak or spoke 17 years ago, as they focus on one thing only, and that is to give back to the people their paradise which was lost eons ago, consisting of an environment conducive to the people's bliss, a surrounding which I have called in my writings a paradise, even though it merely is one at the lowest level of what we can rightfully call a paradise. The essays which follow were all posted in discussion forums of Arabia.com and baladna.com and were also placed on our own websites at the turn of the century. We offer these audio files as a free gift under the Creative Fair Use copyright rules. The text in spoken words may therefore be freely copied, distributed, and stored in any electronic format, provided no text is altered and the author's name is not disconnected from quotations of any length. All commercial copyrights are reserved by the publisher. And now we shall continue with the articles I posted on the 16th of May in 1999, the title of the set I have slightly modified, now calling it, The IMF and World Bank International Financiers Are Sorely Mistaken. I also have on occasion modified the wording to improve the style of the text presented here. Next headline, The Myth on Inflation Exploded. There is hardly another word in the financial industry around which the bankers have created so many lies as we find in a phenomenon called inflation. The banker says, we must curtail the issuing of credit by raising interest rates in order to curb inflation. Then he says to national leaders, if you print too much of your own money you cause inflation because you will have too much money chasing too few goods. The first statement is idiotic and the second is a half-truth, and therefore also a lie. So let's begin with the idiotic one. What is inflation? Inflation is the erosion of purchasing power, where the consuming public finds prices rising on goods and services as time goes by. And therefore the people demand more money in order to reclaim that lost portion of purchasing power. We then have strikes and demands for higher wages. But what causes inflation? Inflation is created when the cost of goods and services are rising by factors out of the producer's control, and where the producer has no choice but to pass the escalating costs on to the consumer. And what are these out-of-control costs? Interest charges by banks on loans, and taxes imposed by governments at all levels, they must be added onto the production cost of any item, and the sum total of all costs make then up the selling price. And so every time we purchase anything, we pay a large percentage of direct and indirect taxes, and interest charges, as part of the purchase price. And all this after our incomes have already seen a substantial reduction through the application of a direct tax, as well as interest charges on loans we may have with banks. Conclusion: nothing causes inflation except taxes and banking usury. By these two factors the worker's bread basket is raised higher and higher until it is almost out of sight. And so as all are struggling with holding down a 9-to-5 job, the banker sees almost full employment and speaks the fateful words, raise rates, because if we don't, the people will have too much money and create inflation. We must slow down economic activity and thereby wrestle inflation to the ground, for when there is less money in circulation then the prices will come down. The gullible believe this twisted logic, and among them are all sorts of so-called experts. How in heaven's name can prices come down when producers are not given a break in taxes and interest charges as well? Should the producer lower his prices while less money in circulation buys fewer of his products, he goes broke, for neither government nor banks will reduce their tax and interest levies just because he sells fewer goods. In fact, a rise in interest rates, to curb inflation, remember, the banker says, has just the opposite effect, because it causes the producer's price to rise also. And what is the fruit of the banker's fight against inflation? Bankruptcies with all its stress and personal disruption in life, a life which ought only to be worth living. Rennie Sentana-Ries, posted the 16th of May 1999, 6:40 a.m., Jordan. Next headline. How to reverse inflation. Since the disastrous years of Trudeau's reign in Canada, we have heard a lot of malarkey coming from government and banks of just how they would go about fighting inflation and wrestling it to the ground. The confusion around this issue is staggering. Inflation is not fought, it is reversed. Once we have correctly analyzed its cause, the reversal becomes easy. Step 1. The national governments must reassume their constitutional right to control and regulate their own currency. For most countries this is easily done, because such powers are already entrenched in their constitutions. Just use them, for goodness sake. Be careful though to not do it alone, lest the combined military forces of nations under control of the international financial community, so-called, lands at your doorstep to throw bombs on your head. They have done it to Germany, they have done it to Japan, they are doing it to Iraq and Yugoslavia, and they will do it to you and your country, unless you act in unison with many other oppressed nations. Step 2. Having implemented Step 1, proceed to cancel all governmental debts allegedly owed to the international community. Just write them a letter and say you owe them nothing. Tell them, they are thieves of your people's properties and they have usurped temporary control over your nation by means of a dirty trick with money they created out of thin air. Tell them that their billions lent to them cost them no more than the ink in their own expensive pens, and that from now on you will do the same for your own country but without hurting the people like they did. Tell them also that you will believe any more of their lies no longer. Step 3. After ridding yourself of all debts to any banker, lower the taxes on the people's income proportionately, seeing that that cost factor to running your national affairs no longer exists. You have also effectively lowered the production costs of all goods and services instantly, and thereby effectively reversed inflation. Then proceed on, by responsibly regulating the issue of credit in order to stabilize and balance your economy suited to your country's productive capacity and needs. Rennie Sentana-Ries, posted on the 16th of May 1999, 6:46 a.m., Jordan. End of Part 5. To be continued in Part 6, where we will speak a word on money hoarding and its effect on the public. Happy listening.